Hello everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent, and in this episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show, we talk about the Errata that came out for the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual, as well as putting pop culture references into your games. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday Morning D&D Show. My name is Jordan with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, good morning, and from snowy Michigan.
Oh,
You
you
guys
got
getting
snow, huh?
Oh yeah, lots of it all week.
Oh, we've got snow, Jordan. We've got snow. So I'm going to get out of studio mode so that I can see your wonderful face, learning all of the ins and outs of OBS this morning. It's really exciting. And this is the Saturday Morning D&D Show. For those of you new to the show, we talk about D&D news, we talk about games that we're running, and kind of expand upon what it means to be a dungeon master in the world of tabletop role-playing games, because we kind of hit walls. I think all dungeon masters hit walls, or they come across things that they're just like, did I do this correctly? Did I not do this correctly? So we kind of talk about all the different aspects of that through our own games that we're currently running. But first, we're going to start with some D&D news as I bring up a window that has all of my notes in it. So what happened in the world of D&D, Mr. Lucian?
Well, it's been a busy week, I think, especially from our notes. We got some more information about the RPG sports, and we know that there's some matches coming up.
They had one already, right?
Yeah, one has happened last week, was the first one,
So
which was funny.
Is that on Twitch, or where is that located? Because I totally missed it. I was like, this thing happened, and it just like went right over my head for how much publicity they were doing with it. Yeah.
Well, it was funny because when I went to dinner with the WebDM guys, that's what we talked about, was the RPG show, and that how it went down and some of the changes they were making, and they had been talking to Grant, who's the DM of it, because they ran their first one to really figure out, okay, what's going on. So it was interesting. And I know there's one today, and I haven't found where it is online. I really should go look for it. I'm going to watch the one today. It's like at 2 p.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Eastern, something like that. You can see it out on Twitter. I'm going to check that one out live and see how that goes. And hopefully when I see that one there live this afternoon, I'll be able to find where the other one is, because I'd like to see what the first one looks like.
Yeah, no, I'm very curious about it. So I would also like to watch it.
Yeah. It's an interesting take, because I mean it's a controversial kind of move at the moment when it kind of started. Remember when the Hasbro CEO put out the tweet about they're really going to start pushing the two brands, and they want to really double down on the esports part of it. And then everybody blew up about, what? We're going to get esports in Dungeons and Dragons? That doesn't work. That doesn't go together. Mm-hmm. And this kind of came on the heels of it, caught some of that fury. And then even when I talk to our fans off and on in either the show or during the streams or whatever, where I talk about it, it's real 50-50, like some are like, I'm interested to see what it is. Some are like, that should never happen in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
It's only a friendly cooperative game. It can't be competitive, this whole thing. So it's definitely one of those things that maybe divides the community a little bit, with at least the way their opinion is.
Yeah. And a lot of people were saying that the rules of Dungeons and Dragons were not meant for player versus player. So the fact that you're implementing this is like, that's not the design of this game. And so why do it? Like, why not design a game that is about this? But it also just kind of feels like it's for fun. And the people that are hating on it, I'm like, well, why can't you just know that it's for fun? Like, people, it's because it all comes down to dice rolls. It's not like a regular MOBA or something where there's actual skill involved and clicking fast. And, I watch the streamers of StarCraft and their hands just go all over the keyboard because they're constantly doing stuff in esports. This is just kind of, it seems like it's for fun. And it's the same thing when Wizards of the Coast was streaming I forget when they were doing this, but it was monsters versus monsters. And so they would have one Wizards of the Coast employee and another one, and they'd be like, you're a beholder and you're an illithid. You guys are going to fight. And they would use their monster stats to fight against each other. But it all just came down to dice rolls. Like there's a little bit of strategy, but in the end, it's, oh, cool, you rolled a 20, you got ahead of me, you know?
Yeah. And I think the difference comes from, and this came up in the dinner conversation, was the minute you put money involved with somebody that can win, there's a $5,000 pool for this tournament.
Yeah.
Things get serious. Things get different. Yet a lot of stuff can happen at that point. And I was really worried. Like the point I kept bringing up was it's a game about subjective reasoning, right? Because you say, I want to do this to the dungeon master, and they have to make a subjective decision to say yes or no, and how well something might work like that, and what's the DC to do it. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden now you have one player that wants to do something against another player, and another player wants to say, well, wait a minute, don't I get more cover because of this, or don't I get this? And the other one's saying, well, wait a minute, I can do this and this. And now you're in the middle to make a very subjective call against two people that are trying to win $5,000.
Yeah. Unlike a Magic tournament where we have like rules for Magic the Gathering, very specific. And so when it comes down to, well, what do the judges say? The judges flip through their rule book and they're like, no, this person trumps this person because of X, Y, and Z. And it's very like, oh, you know, I might not be happy with the result, but at least it wasn't, just somebody's opinion, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So in saying all of that, like what I did this week, and we're going to get to it a little bit later, is I ran a group of my players through an esports adventure this week to try it out, to see. So I'm not just talking out, the side of my mouth or like talking without having actual knowledge. We ran an actual kind of PvP version of a game on Thursday night, which I think we'll get to that a little bit later on when we get through the news, but I'll tell you all about it. So that way I at least I felt like I needed to have a foot in the door, a horse in the race, whatever the different analogies you can use to make sure that I'm speaking on this knowledgeably of like, what did my players like? How did it go? Was it fun? Was it not fun? Where are the problems? Those kinds of things. But it's interesting. If you want to see a match today, whether you like it or not, and it's okay not to like it. There's nobody that, you should never be talked into saying you have to like this or you're not a real Dungeons and Dragons player, or even the other way to say, hey, you're not a real Dungeons and Dragons player because you like esports. None of that's true. This is all about personal taste and what you like, what type of game you like. Maybe you like a more combat oriented game with less RP. I know right now most games are real heavy RP, and a lot of people love that, but that's not always how the style of game has been. And you may be feeling left out if you're that really heavy combat person who doesn't really care too much about RP. And maybe this is more a little bit of your jam of what you do. So just find what you like, because there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And I don't think we need to, bash each other if we like different things.
Nope. I agree. Just play how you want to play.
Yeah.
And then this was interesting. You'll know more about this than I do probably, but the Make a Monster contest.
Yeah. So they did the Photoshop program itself kind of did a contest that also you could win $5,000 and have your creature put into a upcoming book. They didn't say which one, but you could have one of your own creatures. I believe it ended on Friday. So all submissions had to have been in last night. So when I added this, I was thinking that you still had a little bit of time, because you were allowed to download Photoshop for a free 30-day trial. They gave you all the things to kind of use, and you could pick and choose, but then you could go in and make some creatures. What I thought was interesting, and the thing I definitely want to keep on top of, is I'm interested to see what the submissions look like, because I'm hoping they show, here's the top 10, or here's a list of where all the submissions came in, so that we can go back and look at them. Because even if they don't win the contest, I bet there's some really cool nuggets of artwork where you go, oh, that gives me a new cool idea, because these are for new monsters. It wasn't for an existing monster. So it was for creating a brand new monster, which I thought we're always looking for as dungeon masters, to find something that our players have never seen or have never had to tackle. So I'm going to try to keep my eye on it. And if I ever find a list of here were the submissions for this contest, I'll definitely bring it to the show, and so we can post it.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
But
There was some Unearthed Arcana that came out. I feel like we were getting a lot of Unearthed Arcana, and maybe that was just before Xanathars came out, so they were really like, let's playtest everything. And now it's like once a month if we're lucky.
it's supposed to be the second Tuesday of a month. I
Okay.
heard Jeremy Crawford say this on their Q&A this past week, and they are trying to be really good about, if they're not going to have it on the second Tuesday of the month, that they will let us know ahead of time.
But I
But
think
for the most part, yeah,
last
go ahead.
month's was stuff from Wayfinder's Guide, and it was like a lot of people were upset because the Unearthed Arcana was like, here's all these magic items that are already in the Wayfinder's Guide that they want you to playtest so they can fine tune them. But then the people that bought Wayfinder's Guide were, again, just kind of like, oh, you're giving this away for free, and I already bought this PDF. So it was really, I was happy to see this month that it was something new and something somewhat useful if you want to run ship battles, high sea adventures kind of stuff.
Yeah, and a friend of our show, PB, she did a big live stream going through the rules. And one of the things that I noticed is everybody kind of keeps seeing this as ship rules for ships that sail on the sea. But as Mike Merles said in his show this week, these were the very first steps. These are vehicle rules. They only released the ship part because he didn't want to get things confused with all of the feedback. Like, here's how it worked when we were using carts and wagons and battle trains and whatever. Here's how it worked when we use ships. Here's how it worked when we use airships. Here's how it worked when we maybe use some spaceships of some sort. So it's actually something Mike has been working on quite a bit to get vehicle rules into the game. But they started with something that had an anchor for most people to grab onto, which was ship rules. And most people took that to be like seagoing ship rules. But I could tell that this is a set of rules that's a much bigger thing that they plan to bring out. Now, is it going to be in a new product of some sort? It has to be of some sort if they're going to bring out, some type of ship rules. It won't get added to the player's handbook. It's got to get added to something else somewhere down the line. So maybe like a Xanathar's Guide, for whatever we bring out next year or something like that.
Yeah, something, it feels dungeon mastery though, like something that they would release for dungeon masters as opposed to players. So not a Xanathar's Guide, but like DMG2 or something with like extra rules for various combat situations, such as like, and then you can have your Mad Max style road race trip in the desert and like have
Right.
D&D with
Or
that.
a campaign setting that has lots of vehicles in it. And what kind of campaign setting do we know of that has lots of vehicles in it?
Well, Eberron, but
Yeah,
what else?
and Spelljammer.
Oh, Spelljammer, of course. Yeah. Yeah, no. And then there's rumored to be a helm, which is the Spelljammer, basically pilot station. You sit in this chair and you can control your Spelljammer ship. And I think there was rumored to be one in Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and so everyone's just like going Spelljammer crazy. But I really don't. For all the hints and stuff that they drop, I just don't see them. Well, at the same time, I think we've talked about it before, that it's like, why aren't they competing with Starfinder, D&D? And so this would be an easy way to compete with Starfinder. But then do they really need to compete with Starfinder? Like, are people itching for that sci-fi Dungeons and Dragons experience?
There it is. I don't know if it's like the two words you said, sci-fi Dungeons and Dragons experience, but I think there's a lot of people clamoring for the sci-fi experience.
Yeah.
And we know that because Cypher System is so popular. The Strange, all these books that came from Monty Cook, and they're kind of into this sci-fi fantasy area. We know, like you just said, Starfinder, and there's a lot of these Kickstarters kicking off with these that are not strong fantasy role-playing games. They're role-playing games of other genres, whether it's superhero, modern day, Cthulhu, all these other things that aren't necessarily Dungeons and Dragons. And why wouldn't the company who created the genre not have some of the leading products, if not at least the top 5 of those products for those genres? They don't have like a top 5, sci-fi release for people to really go after, but they're the biggest company. Why wouldn't they? So I wonder if they're trying to lean to that, but they keep talking about they want to bring out more setting guides. And I think we're in that phase of 5e, right? Because I think we're far enough into the release of 5e that the things we get now are campaign releases, monster manuals, optional rules, new subclasses, magic items, spells. I mean, and adventures. We're not really into, we need more rule systems, or we need more, or we're ready for 6th edition at this point. We're still just filling out stuff. So I think we see a lot of campaign setting stuff and a lot of optional rule stuff coming out.
It does feel like the next logical step, especially with Ravnica coming out, to be like, hey, here's a campaign setting, and then they could do another one. And a lot of these are just really like beloved settings. Like there are people just chomping at the bit for Dark Sun, and myself for Spelljammer, because I love Spelljammer. So yeah, it'd be really interesting stuff. We'll see where it goes. They're fun rules, though. You should definitely check it out. The ships, Unearthed Arcana, ships, sea ships, sailing ships. But it was good. Yeah. There was something. Oh, the Eratta.
The Eratta.
Out. That's right.
And that's thrown everybody into a tizzy. My players have been contacting me all day about, look at this new rule and how it affects my new character.
I'm just opening it up now. There's like and I'm really happy that they put new next to the things that they changed this time rather than the last time. But they updated the Ranger, the Beastmaster Ranger's Companion. So it has the rules that we talked about last week, where you take the dodge action if you don't issue any commands to your pet. So he kind of is, but still has some of the same problems where your pet dies a little too quickly because it doesn't have a lot of HP, and it's not a good let's throw the pet into battle. It still doesn't feel like that, but they've improved upon it, and they gave it magic damage after a certain level, so it has some extra oomph to it. It's not gonna all those monsters that can't get hurt except for magical damage now can, because your pet has magical damage. So
right. And I noticed there was like a lot of changing the wording from once per day. It seemed like they were getting rid of that phrase a lot through lots of different areas. So they moved it to once per long rest.
Yeah, when you finish a long rest. Yeah, they did. They changed a lot of that stuff.
What was the big bard one? Did they fix the bard one? Because that was the one that everybody was... it wasn't Prayer of Healing, everybody said was broke. But I guess that would have been in Xanathar, so this wouldn't be in the Xanathar. They didn't do anything for... This is just Player Handbook Errata, Monster Manual Errata, and Dungeon Master Guide Errata. So I don't think we'd have an Errata for Xanathars, Mordecaians. I don't think, unless I missed it somewhere.
They are not on the Errata webpage. So, like, I don't know. I don't think there is, but I could be wrong. No, there is, because remember when they released Xanathars, there was that one spell that was like a barbarian ability or something that was completely, it was a huge typo, and it caused a bunch of problems. And so they just said, like, well, we fixed it in later things, so there's got to be errata out for that. But it's mostly just fixing things, not necessarily changing mechanics and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and the big one that my players were sending me to is that they're all big polearm mastery. They love taking that feat, and that was one of the feats that they added a spear to that feat, so they were super happy about that. So I've been seeing that all morning. My players are weird.
I'm looking at the Warlock. It says spell slots on 107. The following text has been appended to the first sentence. To cast your Warlock spells anyway, but then they said Thunderwave has been changed to Witch Bolt. So did they just change out spells that the Warlock can get?
That could be.
Yeah.
We'll have to go through it. So if you have your class, you definitely might want to look through the errata, because I'm seeing stuff for cleric, paladin, sorcerer, warlock. It's a lot of the mage stuff got some changes.
Well, and a lot of it is they changed the word your spells to your sorcerer spells or your wizard spells, so that it's very specific when you're multi-classing, like what this reflects.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So a lot of that has changed, but yeah, the polearm master was changed or updated. I don't know. It's always interesting, and it makes me want to get new books that has all of this stuff in it. Oh, there was actually one thing that I wanted to talk about, the creature statistics. Black bear, the bonus to hit is now +4. Brown bear, it's now +6. Imp has resistance to cold, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magical weapons. The riding horse is now +5 for its attack, and the war horse is now +6. So some improvements there from the original one.
Yeah, and I think those are like common animal companions that you'll see in a lot of adventures. A lot of people pick bear as their or for even druid if they shift into it, or if the rangers have those pets, and then the horses for all your paladins and your fighter type set will constantly have some type of horse. Or that's good for the cavalier.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's good for lots of yeah, so the
And to your
yeah,
point,
so the
that
riding
I want to
horse,
go.
I'm looking at like the older one
Okay.
in my book here. The riding horse was a +2 to hit, and now it's a +5.
Yeah, that's good.
Like that's a big bonus. So I don't know. I don't know if that affects a ranger companion either. Can you have a riding? I guess you could have a riding horse as a. Oh, maybe not, because I think it has to be a medium creature or lower, and horses are large because you can run on it. So yeah, but yeah, the Eratta's out there. Just Google it and you'll find it. And I would definitely check it out, especially if you play a specific class, because you might have gotten a little bump in abilities or something. So it'd be interesting to see.
And all of these updates are in the new printing of the book. So any of the books that you're buying now after this has been released, check that date if it's an older one in the game store. But there are brand new books out today at your game store and will be available worldwide Monday, I believe, on like Amazon and all those places. You can get the newer books also with the variant covers.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go check down to my game store today and see what they've got, and I might do it. And here's the thing. Here's the discussion I wanted to bring up right away about this, because all of a sudden it's gotten expensive to be a dungeon master and a D&D fan because I just picked up Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica this past weekend or so, almost a week ago. I just picked up Dungeon of the Mad Mage because I told my game store to hold Guildmaster's Guide for me, but then I bought it at GameholeCon and I felt bad that they held a book for me, so I went ahead and bought another one. So then I picked up, so I've got the hardcover, and then now I'm going to go maybe buy these new books with these alternate covers. And I was trying to play around with the plugin for Twitch so that when people are watching our streamed games, they can see the character sheets using D&D Beyond. And I go over to D&D Beyond, and to make that work, I've got to buy some of these books to get all of the options that my characters are using. So I've got to buy them another time to see if I can even get it to work on D&D Beyond. And that doesn't include buying maybe a PDF or something else from somewhere else. So it's like, it's gotten and Roll20. I just bought an adventure for Roll20. So I'm like having to buy things 3 times almost to get real use out of them. And at first I would never have complained, but now I'm starting to, because my wife is certainly going to look at my bank account pretty soon and flip out on the amount of books I bought and I'm still doing Kickstarters and all this stuff. So I have a problem, and I'll need our audience to help with an intervention, because I keep buying D&D books and I keep buying RPG games.
You're like the ultimate Wizards of the Coast customer.
I'm a
like
VIP.
They're the one that they love the most, where you're like, oh, you're buying it on all of our things? Like, that's really awesome.
Yeah, you got all the alternate covers, and you got all this other stuff.
Those new covers look really cool. It just feels like Dungeons and Dragons. Like it looks really cool. It's just a big beholder on the Monster Manual, a Sarac on the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then some kind of fire giant, I think. But the art style is really cool. They're almost got like a foil look to them. Much cooler than the Mordenkainen special cover. I feel like it kind of matches the Volo's cover, and it matches the Xanathar's cover was kind of interesting too, but it matches the Volo's cover, which I really like. And I feel like if you have that set, you have like, yeah, but I didn't like the Mordenkainen special cover. I don't know. That was just me.
I love the gold and the blues, but you can see the blue in my background. You can see the purple shirt I'm wearing on. That might be part of it.
But these new books are the new alternate covers are only available on at game stores, I think. So you won't be able to get those online. But if you buy, and that'll be interesting, if you buy online, it's going to be hard to be like, which version am I buying? Because there's obviously backstock of some of these books, Yeah,
and you want the errata in them. So that's why I was saying, definitely check the dates of their printing dates on them. Make sure they're as late as you can find possible. And that way you have the errata in them. Because they should be, all new books they're printing should have that stuff in.
And then you could be like Jordan, who went through his book and wrote little E's next to everything where there was like meaningful errata, where they changed like how something works so that you can go back and be like, oh, I should probably check how this works, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it'll be interesting because again, my wife has a Beastmaster Ranger in our game, and so now with that updated stuff, it's going to be like, okay, well, he's got magical attacks now, and that bonus action of dodge will really help. And kind of now I have to think about it because she rides that her pet a lot because she's a halfling. It'll be interesting if the pet takes the dodge action and she's riding the pet. Does she just automatically get the dodge? I don't know. I have to think about that.
There's a rule about the attacker gets to choose what they're shooting at when it's a mounted thing. I think they get to either choose the rider or the horse or
okay.
the mount. There's some rule that somebody decides who they're shooting at versus you deciding as the person being shot at.
Yeah. And then I think if you take the mounted feat, you can control whether it attacks you or your animal or something. So yeah, I don't know. Lots of rules to go into, but we will talk about our games next. So Lucian, unless there's something else. No, we're good.
Nope, that was it. There were Mike Merle's Happy Hour. They were building a paladin this week. If you wanted to go back and check that out, they did another Q&A with Bart Carroll and Jeremy Crawford. If you're playing Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, there was a new champion released, which was Satine Phoenix's bard character that she plays. That's been released, so you can go get that. But that seemed like the card game finally came out that they were playing, and the new alternate covers. I think that was all the stuff that I could think of that would be interesting to our characters. So it was a lot for them as they got back from the conventions, and they're all gearing up for PAX Unplugged because there's a ton of people going to PAX Unplugged, and that's the thing we're seeing.
Yeah, that's coming up at the end of the month, so that'll be really exciting.
I think that's it for the news.
Okay, so cool. So what are you doing in games this week? It sounds like you had a very exciting week of games.
Yeah. So we had a show at Gamehole Con, and we talked, and I got back, and that was cool. And the one thing I didn't really talk about in that show that I did want to bring up is I did make a brand new character, and it was a Tiefling Warlock. And I already, since it's Adventure League, I've changed it to a Wizard War Mage because I can never let anything sit. I have to go in and tinker. So I've already changed my Adventure League character, but it's an Adventure League character that I'm only going to play at conventions. So hopefully this is like the story of this character who only gets to play at conventions and stuff like that. So that should be pretty fun. And I'm going back into the War Wizard, and I'm thinking that was a Xanathar's Guide subclass that I really enjoyed. That is hard to kind of build something when you're as a wizard and a fighter, because you want high strength, high dex, high con, but you also want your wizard ability, intelligence and stuff high, so that you get all your bonuses for that stuff. So it's been an interesting build, but it's been fun to try to make it work. And then so Monday night was our game. We played Seeking Ravener, which is our big West Marches style game. Our players finished up with their big battle that took 2 episodes to get through. It was epic. They make it out. They use spike growth and gust of wind and the paladin's fear ability. The conquest, it's kind of like a fear. It's not the actual fear, but it's the conquest paladin's ability to get them to go across basically like a cheese grater, back and forth, taking 2d4 damage the whole time. So they went super tactical on this, and I was just thinking about how often do you have to just kind of sit back with your players where they've come up with a really scheme to really push to be like, okay, what's going on here? Because they had this huge plan about all these creatures have to go across this spike growth to get to them. That's going to give them a bunch of damage. And then as soon as they get close to us, we'll push them back through it. Or we'll use like Thorn Whip to pull them, 10 feet or push 10 feet. And they're doing all this stuff. And as a DM, you want to let them do their plan. But at some point, you don't want them to get all of, you don't want to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah,
you want to give it to them a little bit. And then you're like, all right, my creatures are getting out of this and countering it. So how far do you let it go? Yeah.
I always play that as how intelligent the creatures are, because I've done that with zombies, and I'm like, no, I don't think the zombies are smart enough to get out of the bramble, so they'll just keep taking 1d4 as they run directly in a line to you. But yeah, definitely smarter creatures are be like, I'm gonna set this on fire, or I'm gonna like, get out of the way or something like that. So
Yes, because I had this urge, being tactical DM Lucian, to immediately say, okay, well, this guy's only 5 feet in the circle. He's just going to step to the outside and come around and fight him, right? And I was like, because that's tactically what I would do. But then I had to do like what you said. I had to just think back. I pushed myself back before I did it, because I want them to have their plans kind of work. Like, I don't just want to shut it down immediately and counter their plan. I want them to start to see that fruition of their plan, but then something possibly go wrong if it makes sense in the narrative. So I did what I think is a really good GM trick is I made the creatures roll either something like a perception or an intelligence or a wisdom to see, okay, this creature, this magical effect just happened below them. It's freaky. There's a lot of noise going on. There's a lot of flash. There's things dying. Everything's happening. What does this creature do, and how cognizant of it is it in trouble? So like a couple of them missed it, so I pushed them forward and they took more damage. But on their very next turn, I'm like, all right, they're taking a bunch of damage. They got to realize something's going on here. I rolled again, and then a couple of them wised up and realized, okay, if we don't move, we don't take damage. Or if I just get out of this area, which I now see here, I'm no longer in the danger. But I allowed the dice rolls to individually pick the creature's kind of decision, because if they kept rolling, like two of them missed so many times, they died by moving around in this thing, and just completely died because they moved through the spike growth to the point where they had no hit points. And it was all because they kept failing this dice roll. And in my mind, narratively, I told my players that this is them panicking. Like, this isn't supposed to be happening. They're getting hurt. Things are happening. There's magic all around, and they keep making the wrong decision about trying to run away, but that was taking them further and further into this patch of death. And I was like, I'm okay with that. They died. They panicked. They died. They didn't make it out. Whereas the other ones made their rolls on the first round, and it was like these gnolls with bows, and they were just like, okay, we'll stop and we'll just start firing our longbows at these guys until this thing doesn't move. And so they were a little bit more smart about it. And I felt like the players realized that it wasn't me countering their plan. It was the dice deciding how well their plan worked. And after, when I looked back on it, I felt like, okay, it was kind of like a pat myself on the back moment, because it was just a snap decision in the middle of what's going on. It was like, okay, I did a pretty good thing there, because had I just started making choices, then it was me foiling their plan, versus as they're seeing dice rolls happening, it's the dice rolls that are foiling their plan or letting their plan work.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And it's a common problem with dungeon masters, I feel. So
yeah, your players are super smart, and they're going to come up with crazy, cool, loopholey ways to do things.
Or even just synergy between them. They all of a sudden learn, like, oh, you can lay down spike growth and I can lightning lure them through the spike growth and things like that. So it's really kind of neat stuff.
So that was fun. And that's, again, that's our Monday night regular crew. We call them the Monster Squad, because there's like, a Githzerai, there's a Furbolg, there's a Kenku, and then 2 Dragonborns. So it's just like a full-on menagerie of race adventurers there. And then Tuesday night, what feels weird to me is because this whole week has gone by fast and slow at the same time, that I feel like it's been 2 weeks since we've had a show. But then I played Adventure League on Anaris' channel, where I'm playing my really fun 8th level now, Barbarian, and is the Zealot Barbarian class. And I love it so much. I put out so much damage with 2 swords and a Sunblade and just craziness. And I'm building up to my next treasure point. And we're starting to have the conversations about slowing the XP down, because we don't want to get too far ahead of the content that we're at. And it's really weird when you're playing the book Adventure League versus the Adventures of Adventure League. And so we want to make sure, and we have another player that may come back, and if they have a second tier, but we've all moved to 3rd tier, there's not a way to bring that second tier along according to the rules. So we're trying to play a very straight Adventure League game in that. So that was pretty fun. We had a puzzle, though. And it ended with a puzzle that brings up something I thought we could talk about that is an interesting thing, where you go to put in a puzzle or a mystery in your adventure. You've wrote it, or you've read all about it. You've read all the clues as the dungeon master prepping it. And you think in your mind sometimes, this is going to be pretty easy. They're going to get it. And then you're playing it and it's an hour goes by and your players are just like, we don't get it. We don't understand what's going on.
Right.
And there's that frustration level because we're just like, we don't get it. We don't understand. My character's smarter than me. Can they figure it out? They start coming up with that kind of idea, because at some point players can get stumped. And I could tell, and I've been in this position where I've been the DM and I'm like, in Storm King's Thunder, it happened. It was a really easy puzzle. And I'm thinking, why aren't you guys figuring this out? And they just were stumped on it until I finally just kind of really said, okay, guys, this is it. We need to get past this. This is what's happening, so they can move past it. How have puzzles been in your games? Have you done a lot of them? Have you done some of them? Have your players picked up on it quickly, or have you had to actually get them through it because they were just baffled?
Usually every puzzle I have put in my game has some kind of a time limit on it. And if they don't do it within a certain time, there's whatever the consequences is, whether that's like a trap that opens up or an encounter that they have to fight something. So I haven't had those situations where it's just like, we're just not getting it. What do we do? Like, the door is still locked. We don't understand how to open the door. So we're just going to stand here until Jordan gives them a clue. Like, I haven't run into that situation.
That was what happened.
But that's like it's a common situation for people to happen, And so in my games, I've never locked a door like that, or I've never had like a situation like that. But to be honest, I don't know. I think I would say, okay, you guys can roll to get some clues, and then have them roll an intelligence check or something. But then you're leaving up to the dice. What if they fail that? Like, all of a sudden, is it just like, is this just an insurmountable thing? And maybe they need to go back and get help. Like, that could be a situation where it's like, I don't want to go back to the city of Omu because we're in the middle of nowhere, but like, we need to go back to something and find an NPC that has the answer. I don't know. How did you end up handling it?
Yeah, I think eventually, and here was the thing too, that we have to be careful as dungeon masters to not keep making comments that make it say like, guys, this is super easy.
Oh yeah.
Because then the players are like, why are we so dumb?
Yeah, that's not the correct way to handle it.
So you got to be super careful. And it's not that happened, but it was getting close to that, because I could tell our GM thought, like, why aren't you guys getting it? I don't understand. I don't know why you guys aren't getting this. It's right there. He kept saying, here's the clues. These are the only 2 clues you need to figure this out. It's right there. And I'm just like, I get it, but we're still not getting it. Well, we did have an NPC that was with us, and eventually we weren't going to get it. We just were not going to get it no matter what we did. And eventually his NPC fed us enough that I think he just gave it to us. I don't even think we really figured it. It wasn't like, here's one more clue. Here's one more clue. It was like, I given you all the clues. If I give you any other clue, I'm just telling you what it is. And that's what it ended up being. And we're like, oh, okay, so now that makes sense. Yeah. Because it just didn't make sense to us at all the way it was presented. And so we had to talk about it too. We're like, well, is that the fault of somebody who designs the thing? Or can that happen? You can just be stumped and you're stumped. What do you do? If your adventure is, and this is a slight spoiler, but most people will know this in Tomb of Annihilation, there's a point where you're trying to gather several things before you can move on, right? And if you don't gather that thing, you can't move on. So it's not like something you can just say, well, all right, we'll never figure it out. We're not smart. Our group's different. We'll just leave it alone. You have to figure it out or you can't move on. So there has to be something. So it made me think about if I put a puzzle in or I put a mystery in and the players are having a really hard time, I want to be cognizant of, even though I'm making those, and even though I wrote down the things that say, okay, here's the 10 clues they can find. And obviously, if they have these 10 clues, it'll be easy for them to figure out. My mindset needs to be, here's the 10 clues, but be prepared if the 10 clues doesn't give it to them either. Like, it's just like they could get off on a red herring, or something is just not popping up, or somebody keeps saying one thing that keeps throwing the group off because their mind is going that way and everybody focuses on that. But then you had to come back. So there's a lot of this in Tomb of Annihilation with putting this puzzle stuff in. Don't let it ruin your night. Don't let, because we left that night kind of deflated a little bit. Like we were like, oh, okay, well, we had to be told what it was. We're frustrated because we couldn't figure it out. We spent 2 hours of time trying to discuss getting through it, sitting in this room, staring at the puzzle. Nothing's happening. You know, it's nothing like we're not fighting. It's nothing's happening. We're just staring at it, trying to, does this work? If I touch this, does this work? Should I move this thing? No, it doesn't move. Oh, that doesn't do anything if you touch it. What if I search again? You don't find anything. You know, it's just like, ah. And so that's a frustration. So be careful, you know, for DMs. Like, use this as a cautionary tale. If you have a puzzle in, you have a mystery, be ready for them to be stumped. Be ready for some way to help move that along so it doesn't deflate the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me, and it's funny that you said this is in Tomb of Annihilation, because one of my patrons was having the exact same problem, only I think it was their DM misinterpreted the puzzle. So there was no solution. Like, because the DM in his mind was like, well, the solution is this, but that wasn't actually, like, he misread it or something. And so they were having a really hard problem of like, there is no solution to this puzzle because you misunderstood how the puzzle works. And so something like that could happen as well. Like there's lots of situations where this just doesn't work out. And I don't know, as you were talking, I was just thinking about like maybe even just a hot cold, like you guys are getting warmer or like you're getting colder so that they know to go in a correct direction as opposed to just being stumped. But
or divine intervention if they have a cleric or a paladin or a spirit to help out to add in further. Or if you have to, and they spend enough time and they can't get through it, find a way to get them through it, just so it doesn't take, you know, I just felt like you don't want your game to end on a low note. You always want that game to be excited because they want to come back next week and they want to play again next week if they're excited from what happened the week before. But if it's like just deflation, then all of a sudden maybe somebody has an excuse why they can't make next week's show or whatever. Yeah. And so I always want to be, I'm trying to be more cognizant. And so in my mind, I want to think, if I'm going to have to put it in mind, I want to be sure there's a way to help them out.
Yeah, for sure. So
that was the big thing I wanted to pull out for that. So as you can see, GM Lucian was learning all kinds of things this week. And then because I had my trip at the end of the week for work canceled due to weather on the East Coast. I know the East Coast is getting hit with a pretty big snowstorm over there and ice and rain and all that stuff. It freed it up. So I decided to put out a note on my Seeking Revenor group and say, hey, if 4 of you can get together, I've got a special adventure that I'm going to whip up, because I was inspired by this RPG sports and talking with Grant and the WebDM guys about it. And I'd been reading a book called Sufficiently Magic. And in it, it's kind of like a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons version of maybe Harry Potter, but not necessarily for kid Harry Potter. It's not like young adults. It was more like a college, a magic college that these students would go to. And they had this ability to choose what classes they could choose to pick to learn more about magic and what they can do with their powers. And one of them was a dueling class. And so in the book, it talks about this dueling arena where these different students would fight one another. And so I took stuff that came from that book about how the arena worked and the things like there were, what I did is I set up an arena that each of the players would play in. And I couched it in an actual RP storyline. So the storyline was, hey, somebody needs you to go out to some farms. They said a stranger's come into town, started causing problems. He looks kind of like an adventurer, so they're asking for some other adventurers to come and help out with this. So these, just to get them out there. Then when they get out there, the whole place is laid to waste. Everything's on fire. Everything's burned down. And they come across a group of people that are cowering before what stands there as a god. And the god, it's a true god, a real god. And he's there about, you've been taking from the land, you haven't been giving back, and this is bad. And so you need to be punished. And then the players come up and I'm like, oh, so you've summoned your champions. Well, I'll let them complete a challenge to see, if I should be lenient for you. So just to give them a way to actually play. So then I teleport them to this kind of arena. And in the arena, it's all sandstone kind of squares. big 5-foot squares all over, but there's runes placed all over the place in different geometric patterns. If you step on the runes, they do something. It's pretty clear to them. So then I put each player one against the other, and the challenge is they have to fight each other, and they have to learn about sacrificing, was the whole point behind it. So they all kind of played in, and they were like, okay, let's play this. So we had, like the ranger fighting a cleric and a cleric, and then a spell singer fighting a paladin, and all this stuff happened. But it was really fun to have these classes fight each other. They were low level, and it felt like they had a ton of fun. And in the first couple rounds of the fights, they avoided the runes that were on the floor, and they just fought out in the open areas because they didn't really know what they were. There was no guide to say, this is what this one does. One of them was like a fire trap. You take 1d6 damage. One of them was a teleport to another rune, a random one. You roll a dice, and you just show up on that other rune. One was you step on it, and it brings up a big wall in front of you for cover, 10-foot wall by 15 feet wide. And then one of them was you get 10 temporary hit points. So by later in the rounds, because they were fighting each other one at a time, they started realizing these runes were helping out. And then there was this epic battle between the wizard spell singer and the paladin.
Now you say spell singer, do you mean blade singer?
Blade singer, that's okay. What I'm thinking. I always think spell singer just because, yes, blade singer. The blade singer, and they had an epic battle that went back and forth because they were stepping on runes and they were doing things, and they were tactically trying to push each other into the traps, and they were dodging and using pets to get the help action and countering each other's special abilities with their own special abilities. And I was just sitting back just as kind of like the referee, similar to what I think the RPG sports stuff is doing. Now theirs is team-based, but this was a one-on-one character-based. And it was actually really fun. It was so fun that another group wants to run through it of the group because they're like, we want to try that after I explained it to them. So it helped me realize that letting your players be competitive, even in a storyline framework, and I don't know if it's this way all the time. Like, I don't know if I want to run a campaign where all they do is every night they fight each other, gladiator style. That might not work, but once in a while for a storyline or even for just this fun, they actually enjoyed pitting themselves against another character for the first time and having to think about, how am I going to beat that other person that normally we're working together and we come up with cool strategies and synergies? How am I going to just focus everything I have on defeating that person? Which is pretty fun.
No, it slightly reminds me, and I talked about this in an earlier episode, where I had a mirror reflect all of my characters, all of my players, and then my players had to fight their like evil doppelgangers. And so it was a lot of player versus player action. And I always thought that was interesting, is that they were like, the monk was like, oh, well, I'll go fight myself, when they would have been smarter to mix it up and have the monk fight like the ranger that had a lower AC and was able to like take him down. But they all thought it would be fun to like fight themselves. So
yeah. Well, and some people will think, like, I was talking to one of our players about it, and they were like, oh, well, there's a lot of classes that aren't built for just one-on-one fighting. And he's like, yeah, because he's like, yeah, that blade singer, or even if you did like a swashbuckler rogue, is going to tear everybody up, because at that low level you always get your sneak attack damage. That's huge damage, and you can dive away without taking a reaction attack. So it's like, oh, that guy's always going to win. And I was like, no, well, you don't know that, because the cleric all of a sudden, and the paladin and all these people, they save their abilities and spells to help the team throughout the fight. What happens when the paladin doesn't save any of his spell slots and just starts raining smites down on just you and nobody else? Or what happens when that cleric starts just hammering away at you with spells or keeping themselves up and not you? There's a huge dynamic that changes when all of a sudden I'm not saving stuff for later in the fight. I'm only going to send everything I've got at you. Mm-hmm. Wizard Magic Missile nearly killed people in a one-shot. Sacred Flame nearly took down one of the other characters in just one dice roll. Had they rolled just a couple more points of damage, person would have went down with one Sacred Flame. So it was just like this weird back and forth that they had of maneuvering and having fun and fighting each other. And it was cool to let them try to really get that out of their characters and play it out. So we're going to do another one maybe tomorrow with the Monster Squad, see if the Monster Squad, how well they do,
Cool.
because they're third level characters. So that's going to up it. These other ones were first and second level, which was very manageable at that level. I have no idea what would happen if you pitted two 10th level characters against each other. It could just be it could go quick, or it could be a slog. Like it could just be like a 2-hour battle that just goes back and forth, back and forth. The final battle between the Blade Singer and the Paladin went back and forth, back and forth. Bad rolls, dodges, blocks, all kinds of stuff. They were both down to whoever hit the next person, whoever landed successfully and damaged next would be the winner. And they went a couple of rounds not hitting each other. And then finally the Blade Singer sends it home with a kill. So it was really crazy. And they didn't kill each other. They got teleported back and they got all their hit points back. And then the god gave them leniency for being great champions of the farmers. And it was really fun. I got to use a god from the Gods and Goddesses book that Jetpack 7 put out, which is a 5e supplement that we talked about that I bought up at Gen Con. It was the god of Inti. He's the god of creation, but a lot of farmers and a lot of ranch type people will worship or at least pray to them. And so the deal he struck was they have to give up 1/3 of their crop, which is a very actual historical thing of back in kind of the Mayan and Aztec days. So it was interesting. So it was super fun. And I encourage you that if you haven't tried it yet, as a fun one-off, like Jordan had done his with the doppelganger ones, which I thought was really cool. Just have an arena fight with them. Let them do it once or twice just to have fun. I think everybody had fun. Nobody came away with it like they didn't have fun. They all had a good time. And it might be something you try just to let your players fight each other once or twice throughout your campaign.
Yeah. No, it made for an interesting fight, and my players had a lot of fun. So I think, and it's different. It was cool for them to see how tough they were when they fought themselves. So they're just like, oh my gosh, I have to break a 20 AC, and I'm like, yeah, because that's what you have. But you also have like a +8 to hit. So,
so that was pretty good. So that was my super busy day. There was going to be some charity games, but I never got a message back from the person. So I don't know if I was going to be any charity games today. So the only thing I might do is something tomorrow, but then we'll start up next week with a whole nother round of more gaming, and it's Thanksgiving. So my plan is maybe to run even more games than even before. Maybe run some really nice big mega games that take more than just the 3 hours I've been running now, because people could show up at noon and we could play till midnight or something, some type of crazy.
That'd be crazy. Yeah. That'd be fun.
So that's what I did all week long. It felt like a long week, a fun long week. But how was Jordan's week in gaming?
I don't have a lot to report. I did do that charity game with Ted from Nerd Immersion, which was really fun. And we did like a 3-hour chunk of it. And I played a Yuan-Ti ranger with a snake companion. And we worked in a coffee shop in Waterdeep called Homebrew was the whole premise. And so all of the adventures that Ted was running was in this coffee shop called Homebrew. And so he kind of gave us a recap of like what happened before we got there. And apparently there's a competitive tea shop across the street, and the players before us decided to just go and like destroy that tea shop because they were saying bad things about coffee. And they ended up fighting like a boulet or a boulette. How do you pronounce it?
Oh yeah. I would have said bullet, but it's like Bullett or something.
Yeah, and
like
I think
that,
the French pronunciation is boulet. And so
they
they were calling it a boulet, and then it was actually like a mint flavored one. So they ended up killing it and putting it in this like thing, and it became a creme brulee. And so like lots of funny puns and all this stuff, but it got me thinking. Over. What?
Bad puns.
Yeah, they were bad puns. There were lots of bad puns. But the highlight of the game really was Celeste, who is the dungeon master for Venture Maidens. She was playing with us, and she was playing a monk and ended up... Ted has these random trinket tables, and they could buy trinkets for us, the audience members, to help for the fundraising for the stream, for the charity Extra Life. And one of the things that they rolled on was a like 4-star Dragon Ball. And so we were just like, oh, like that's kind of funny. And so Ted ran with it, and she kept finding Dragon Balls throughout the entire game. And the audience was just getting more and more hyped. Like, what if she gets all the Dragon Balls? What if she gets all the Dragon Balls? And so at the very end, she got the last Dragon Ball, and it was like, well, we need to make a wish. So we summoned the dragon from Dragon Ball Z and made this wish. And her wish was to become CEO of Homebrew Coffee. And my snake, my pet snake named Bill, was going to become CFO and in control of Homebrew Coffee as well. And we just had a really good laugh about it, and we were going on and on, but it got me thinking, like, do you ever put just weird items like that in your game, or like pop culture references in your game? Like, it kind of takes you out, and this was it takes you out of like the realism of it, but we are just playing a fun, silly game, and it made me want to put, like, I don't know, like Excalibur in the game, or something from a video game. And I remember Mike Krahulik was saying that he, in one of his D&D games, just put all of the boss monsters from World of Warcraft in there. And so all of his like friends were fighting against World of Warcraft monsters, and they had a great time because they all knew the references, and it was just really fun. So have you ever done that? Have you ever thrown in a Dragon Ball?
Yeah, I've thrown in some hints to pop culture because I do try to keep my game pretty rooted in the universe. But every now and then I like to use names or something that I know my players are going to be like, when they hear it, they're just going to go crazy. Or I don't know if I've done items so much as names of places, or the description of a place, or like the way the house looks or the way the ship looks. And usually I'll use some type of pop culture reference to give a nod to something, but not let it take it too far away. Like, not like, oh, you see Mickey Mouse walking down the road, all right, let's all have an Animaniacs, but I could see where that could be really fun, especially depending on what type of group you're playing with. Yeah. Because we all are nerds and love pop culture references. If I throw in something like from Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Predator, my players are going to jump all over that. Or they might like you said, Dragon Ball Z, or something from like Naruto or something. Just any of these things that are out there that we love throwing that stuff. And that's what Dungeons and Dragons does, right? All throughout the books, you will find pop culture references inside the books too, because they throw those, especially Chris Perkins loves to throw those little tidbits in there and stuff like that too.
It's really good for one shots, obviously. Like, if you were just like, I want to do a Predator one shot, or I want to do a Naruto one shot, or something like that, and just kind of build and allow your characters to build characters around that, or allow your players to build characters around that, is really fun. But and I don't know, it makes me think, like, I had a one-handed warlock that we named Mark Hamill because he had one hand and he could like summon a sword from nowhere, and it was just kind of like, oh, that's like funny, and you just drop little things like that. I'm blanking on some of the other stuff that I've thrown in there, but I've never gone so gonzo that I'm like, no, like straight up, here are the 7 Dragon Balls, like, which it really made me want to run another game like that. I'm like, I want to make a one shot like that, where I just take like a movie that I love, or a series or a manga or something, and just incorporate it into D&D 110%. Like, I think it would be really fun. Like, all of a sudden everybody has the ability to summon giant toads, and you're like, okay, now we're going to like have a giant toad fight, and it's going to be awesome.
That's cool. When I like using, like, I always like to reference, like, if I have guards or sheriffs or constables or things like that, I always like to reference things that I know my players are really into. So like, I'll say this is Constable Bullock or Swearingen, and they'll know the reference right away. Or I'll reference Justified all the time, or I'll reference all these other shows that I know we're all talking about, and so just to put those names in there, just to have a lot of fun with, or whatever book we happen to be reading. Because like, I just got done reading Ready Player One, and that was all about Easter eggs in games and things like that, and throwing in, that's what the whole thing is about. And I just thought, yeah, that's really cool. Or putting in something that has to do with, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or just like small references that not enough that it derails anything, but enough that people get a chuckle or a laugh, or they think, oh, okay, so we're going to save the chocolate farm of Mr. Wonka. Okay, we get it.
Christmas games are like that for me, where I've done a lot of Christmas games where it's like Santa is kidnapped or something, and so you have you just start like doing just funny, silly things like that. But
yeah, or yard gnomes. That was
yeah.
another one I was thinking about, having a yard gnomes attack mice so that they were like, and like the gnomes get offended, like the real gnomes get offended. Who are these people? Why are you calling them yard gnomes? Why are they attacking us?
Yeah, but and then I ran my home game, and there was nothing really special about that. It was just kind of another game. They're slowly getting through this dungeon. They fought some slotty, and that was really exciting. Say what?
I love Slat.
No,
Those
yeah.
are super cool creatures.
They're super fun. They actually did a really good job of. There were 4 creatures in like test tubes being studied, and 2 of them were slotty, and 2 of them were some fey creatures from Tome of Beasts. And the Tome of Beasts were evil, but the Slod were neutral. So the paladin used divine sense and was like, well, these 2 are not evil, but these 2 are evil. And they ended up befriending the Slod and tried to get them home. They're like, how can we send these Slod home? And it was unexpected, I guess. And so that's another thing to talk about, where I was very much like, we're going to have a fight against these 4 monsters, but they totally made it, them plus the Slod versus the 2 evil ones. And then they figured out ways to like help the Slod home. So by the end of it, I said, they ended up getting a Slod mind crystal, or the Slod have like these gems in their head. And I said, you ended up getting one of those and you're able to summon a Slod for help for like 1d6 rounds. Nice. So that's going to be interesting in the future when they have this, they called it the Slod Pokeball, and they're able to like throw it into the game and summon their Slod to help them fight for a certain amount of rounds. So we'll see where that goes in the future. They've got a couple of really big fights coming up, so I'm excited to see how they're going to handle it. Yeah.
I think that would be a fun version of a Dungeons and Dragons game where it was Pokeball people that go around, or they have something that they throw out and then it fights for them. Mm-hmm. And that's the game. So like you have your adventure party, each one of them has their unique selection of 1 or 2, maybe a third thing. Maybe they can only throw one out at a time or something, but then the strategy and the fun for them is either finding a way to power up the ones they have, or what is the strategy and I need to throw the right one for the right fight that we're in to do, and then having a whole adventure based on that. I think that'd be pretty fun, even though like it's a card game, it was a kids show, but there's still a lot of fun to be had in a concept of that.
There is a tabletop role-playing game of Pokemon. So
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, no, and I hear it's actually really fun. I've never played it, but it sounds really interesting. So
we got to play some of these other games. I've got so many games. I just did another Kickstarter. I got to start playing some more games.
Did you do the Invisible Sun Kickstarter at all?
I did not. That one was expensive.
Yeah, and that was the same thing. I was really interested in it, but for $250 to get the base game was a little too much, but it looked really cool. So
this one, which was their best game ever Kickstarter, I did that one. I did their Numenera Kickstarter, but I just did another superhero Kickstarter that Adam Coble was showing on his channel. I'm a sucker. Every time Adam Coble brings up a RPG on his channel, I click the buy button because I just watch him review it and I'm like, yeah, you're right. That looks cool. That's super fun. I got my 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy book in finally. I've got a couple more superhero ones coming on the way. I bought another. It's just like, I love this stuff. I read about it. I get excited about it. Mm-hmm. And then I buy it. And then months later, it shows up at my door and I go, oh, I don't have time to play that. I'm still doing this other stuff.
Maybe we need to set a goal for January, New Year's resolution, at least one weekend a month you have to play a new RPG.
Yeah, I almost feel like I need a Saturday morning D&D show, but then I need a Saturday night RPG show, which forces me not to do a D&D thing, but forces me to say, okay, for this show or this thing I force myself to play another system.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out to the Saturday morning D&D show. I'm still having streaming problems, but I'm going to call my ISP here shortly and figure out what's going on so that we can stream a little better on YouTube. But as always, you can catch us on Twitch live Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And thank you again just for coming out and hanging out with us, guys, and talking about Pokemon and D&D. We always have a really great time talking to you, and we're really excited that we have people in chat to chat with us and talk back. So that's fantastic. Anything else, Mr. Lucian?
No, definitely go to the video on YouTube that gets posted up and keep the comments going. Chat was great today, but we want to definitely keep the comments going. Check out the merch store for Jordan's channel, which he's got a lot of cool stuff up. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, Black Friday is right around the corner, and hopefully I will have some discounts on Saturday morning D&D mugs, shirts, and other things. So yeah, check it out. And with that, we will see you next week on a very special Thanksgiving Saturday morning D&D show, which will be here. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.